My name is Martha, and I'm the content marketing manager here at Wynter. And I'm thrilled today to welcome our webinar guest, Andrea Wunderlich. She is the director and product marketer at Maxio. And she is a marketing powerhouse who doesn't just talk about marketing theory. She's in the trenches. She's testing what actually works. So today we're going to be learning all about turning brand research into revenue. And as we know, lots of companies invest in expensive brand studies only to watch that valuable data gather that dust. But not today's speaker, and definitely not at Maxio. So when Andrea was faced with a brand crisis after merging two established brands, she not only saved the company $230,000 using Wynter, but she turned the research into some pretty measurable and pretty remarkable results. So I'm going to hand over to Andrea now to speak us throughout her journey, but just a quick housekeeping check. So we're going to be asking lots of questions at the end of the session, which you can find in the Q&A and the chat box area. So just make sure you're posting all of your questions within SQL, and we'll get to those right at the very end. But thank you, everyone, and please join me in welcoming Andrea Wunderlich. I will pass over to her now.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I love doing webinars. But for some reason, it's like more stressful than doing an in-person speaking engagement because I can't see you, see me, I can't see you. I don't know how you're reacting, and I hate that. So I am going to encourage some like lively participation in the chat. Like, so if everyone could just drop in like where you're calling from, what you're hoping to get out of this session, your favorite fruit, I don't know, something, so that I don't feel like I'm speaking into an abyss. That would be so great. Thank you, Pep. Mango. See you at spring again. Yes, I'm very excited. I'm very excited. Ooh, from the UK. Richmond, Virginia. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. That helps a lot. Okay, so I'll get straight into it. We have 30 minutes or an hour, Martha? Remind me.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Yeah, we have up to an hour basically. So as long as you like, and as many questions that people have to ask as well. So we've got that time dedicated.
Okay. All right, let's boogie then. I have some slides. I'm going to show you guys some slides. I have to like figure my life out because I have slides I'm going to show, and then I need speaker notes on the other screen. So if it looks like I'm doing this, it's because I'm not off book yet, and this is me getting ready to be off book for the in-person event next month. So let me do this. Share screen. Can people see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Will anyone have a panic attack if I don't do presenter mode? I don't like presenter mode. I think everyone will live. What are people saying? Yeah.
I think it's okay. Everyone's saying yes, yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So cool. So as Martha very graciously teed up for me, I want to talk about brand research / market research. I know those are two different things, but they are kind of like hand in hand. So, use whatever term you think is appropriate. But first, I want to introduce myself. I hate when I'm being talked at by people who I don't know, and I don't know why I should care. So a little bit of a personal introduction. So my name's Andrea. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised, have always been down here in the South. Went to school up the road in Athens, Georgia at the University of Georgia. So go Dogs, big SEC football fan. I am a dinkwad. So my husband and I are dual income with no kids with a dog, and actually multiple dogs. So that is a fun facty about me. I love to travel. We try to get out of the country once a year. And if we can't make it out of the country, we try to do something really cool stateside. Like a couple years ago, we like road tripped up the PCH in California, and that was magical. And I saw how much gas prices were along the PCH, and that was not so magical. I love to read. So if you need a book recommendation, I'm your gal. I read a lot of fiction. I don't read a lot of business books. Like, don't tell my CEO I said that, but He sends me a lot of business books to read, and I usually Google summaries and then have ChatGPT help me with thoughtful responses for him. So let me know if that's anyone else as well. Yeah, I've been working in B2B SaaS for 7 years, 8. This is year 8. I'm like a B2B SaaS baby. I started my career here in Atlanta working for a company called Full Story. I was an SDR there. Then I moved to a company called SaaS Optics, and I was a content marketing manager. Then I got whisked away to this company that you guys have probably heard of called Chili Piper. Did that for a while, really missed my people at SaaS Optics, and ended up going back to SaaS Optics, which by this time had merged with a competitor actually called Chargeify. And that was under Battery Ventures in like 2021. And those companies merged and the products merged, and the decision was made that we were going to rebrand. So we're going to have a new company name, a new product name. And that is really like the source of the lore, of the fodder for today's conversation. So just quick note too, in case you don't know what Maxio is. So Maxio does billing, and then some like accounting stuff like revenue recognition, and then also like reporting on SaaS metrics. So what's my ARR, what's my MRR, yada, yada. So that's what we do. But I do want to get into kind of like some of the stuff that happened, right? So it's interesting, like, I don't know who made the decision that we were going to rebrand. All I know is that the decision was made. And I think it was an incredibly well-intentioned decision. There was this idea, truly, when the merge happened, that like 1 + 1 = 3, right? Like we have these 2 great products, these 2 great companies, like we're going to bring them together, and it's going to be something, hopefully new and better than what the legacy brands and products had left us with. So great, well-intentioned decision. As we all know, sometimes in marketing and in life, those don't work out that well. So I found this picture of Miley on the wrecking ball because I thought this was super apt description of what happened when we rebranded and changed the name to Maxio. Essentially what we did is wipe out 10 years of brand equity. So SaaS Optics had been around since 2009. Coincidentally, Chargeify had also been around since 2009. So by 2021, that was, help me math, 10-ish years, 11 years of brand equity that we essentially said, we're going to just cancel that in lieu of building this new brand. And that had sort of drastic unintended consequences for us, which we as a company and we particularly as a marketing team had to figure out and overcome. But I think even more importantly than like, what are we going to call it? And, how are people going to receive the new name? Are they going to intuitively understand the value? Is we really had to figure out like, who is Maxio for? So like, this is a pretty big deal. Like SaaS Optics had a very unique audience. You're going to hear me use this term audience. The way that I define an audience is a combination of like company size, persona, title is what I really mean when I say persona, because I believe that persona has some like psychographic implications as well. But so we'll call an audience is company size, title or general like roles and responsibilities, and then some kind of use case or job to be done, whatever verbiage floats your boat. I'm a big fan of jobs to be done. Use case feels a little more accessible for most people. And those 3 things, I believe, kind of create an audience. And so when I think about SaaS Optics and Chargeify, there were really 3 audiences. SaaS Optics had 1. So that was SMB and mid-market, like finance and accounting teams at B2B SaaS companies. So there's an industry layer there too. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to bill for complex sales negotiated contracts and manage revenue recognition as well as SaaS metrics. If you are not an accountant, all of that probably sounded like mishmash to you, but just imagine that you are an accountant and that you're like, yes, this is my daily pain. I feel this on a spiritual level. This is exactly my jam, my bread, my butter. So that's SaaS Optics. Chargeify, on the other hand, had two distinct audiences and a little bit of a different path to market than SaaS Optics had taken, right? So Chargeify had startup founders at any recurring revenue business. So it didn't have to be B2B and it didn't have to be SaaS. It just had to be some company that has a recurring revenue business model. And those founders were primarily looking to stand up basic billing and payment operations. They were like, hey, I have this product. I've launched it. I need a way for my customers to pay me. And so we're primarily competing with like the Stripes of the world in this arena. And then the other audience they had, which was totally different, were these large enterprises, usually like product managers or engineering managers at large enterprises, who were adopting a subscription-based pricing model for the first time. Like think of like if Coca-Cola wanted to sell a Coca-Cola subscription. And they were like, we have no idea. We are a like older company. We manufacture a like physical good. That's our bread and butter. Now we're talking about spinning up a SaaS application like that. Those were the kinds of people who would come to Chargeify and say like, we need help with this subscription business. And we believe you can help us. So three very different audiences with very different needs. And another important thing to kind of note about Maxio is like we are PE owned. We are not a venture-backed company. So like we do not have some unlimited venture budget. And then obviously, you know, the market has shifted too, where like there's more of a focus on growth efficiency than growth at all costs than ever before. But imagine that all these people who've been working for PE-backed companies, like this has always been their reality, is they've never had mega budgets. They've always had to make really hard decisions about who are we going to go after and who are we going to serve? Because I think in a venture-backed company, it would have been like a no-brainer. We'll go after the three. We're going to capture them all, right? Pokemon, got to catch them all. But not so for us. Like we really needed to figure out like who's the primary audience, who's the secondary audience, who are we maybe going to not focus on so much in order to efficiently capture market share and create demand. So what did we need to figure out? We needed to understand. This has happened maybe a year or two after we launched the Maxio brand, and we were sort of struggling to gain traction. And we kind of felt like, we don't know if people really know Maxio. They're definitely still no SaaS Optics and Chargeify. Like I think we had a situation at a trade show where we had gone to SaaSt or something, and we had Maxio on our booth, and we were demoing to somebody in the booth, and they were looking at it and they were like, this is really interesting, but we really want to check out SaaS Optics as well. And we were like, oh, we are SaaS Optics. This is SaaS Optics, but they didn't know that, right? So like, that was sort of one of those like gut feelings of like, we've got like a lot of work to do in terms of establishing the Maxio brand. So what we needed to figure out was awareness first and foremost. Then we needed to understand audience segmentation. And then finally, we needed to understand perception. So what do these specific audiences think Maxio does? Because it really varies depending on who you're talking to. So those are the things that we set out to figure out. And there were a couple ways that were sort of presented as options for doing this, right? First was my CEO, Randy. Hey, Randy, if you're here, you're probably not, but I'm sure you may look at the recording later. Hey, Randy. He wanted to hire a market research firm to go out and gather this information. And he had gone and done a couple sales calls with a few of these firms. They were, they had to start from scratch in terms of recruiting an appropriate audience. They wanted to work with us for months on building a survey. And then they wanted even longer than that to like get, incentivize respondents. And then do the, data analysis and the readout. And like, this was going to be a 6-month project. And we got quoted, I believe on the low end, $100,000 and on the high end, $240,000, which is an astronomically high amount of money. But I mean, if it takes 6 months, maybe it's not. But, I had been using this tool called Wynter to do some other stuff, mainly message testing. So I remember, I think the first time I used Wynter a few years ago was when we were trying to figure out what the category name for Maxio was. And we were playing with a few things internally, and we were in one of those war room discussions where everyone's like fighting, and it's, the gnashing of teeth and, swarms of locusts and all that. And I was like, you know what? We should just go to Wynter and we should just build an audience that looks like our audience and ask their opinion. And that's what I did. And I'd run a preference test in the past. Then I noticed that Wynter had released this new product for surveying. And to me, the real value in Wynter is that like the audience has already been curated. Like, you don't have to pay someone to go build an audience. The audience that we need as B2B SaaS companies is already there. So I went to Randy and I was like, hey, I think we can do this in Wynter. And I think it's going to cost us like 10 grand. And, he had some doubts about, well, Andrea, you're not a professional researcher. You're just a girl. Like, I don't know if it's going to be up to snuff, but like, how about this? Try it and we'll see. So that's what we ultimately did, is we ran this survey. And I did a bunch of data analysis, which was really hard for me because I had to spreadsheet and I had to do normalization and I had to create pivot tables and I had to think about things. And this was before ChatGPT could like do all of those things for me. So that was hard and it took a couple weeks, but I'd say like, from test launch to test completion, like 2 or 3 days. And then for all of the analysis and the readout was like 2 weeks. So we're talking about 2.5 weeks versus 6 months. We're talking about $240,000 versus $10,000. To me, that ROI story, I mean, that's math. Even I can math. It's a no-brainer. Like the access to insights that are invaluable to us and the speed with which we could access those was super compelling. So I'll get off my Wynter high horse and keep going here. But the point of this talk is really to talk about like, what do you do with brand or market research once you have it? Because obviously, like, people can anyone can go run a Wynter test or survey, and anyone can go hire a market research firm. The hard part is like, well, what do you do once you have insights into what's going on in your target market? I don't know, like, I don't claim to be some authority on what to do in terms of brand strategy or market strategy, but I can share what we did and what our results are. So that's kind of like the back half of this presentation. Let me see how 11:18, we're cooking with gas. Okay. So these are the things that we looked at when we ran this survey. So we wanted to understand aided and unaided awareness. So we wanted to understand if we prompted our target audiences, plural, with, hey, when you think of a billing solution or a billing vendor, who do you think of? And we wanted to see who they mentioned without being prompted with specific brand names. Then we wanted to help do aided awareness. So when we said, hey, which of the following billing vendors have you heard of? And we gave them a pick list of like Stripe and Zora and Chargebee and Recurly and there's a lot of players in this market. So that's fun. We wanted to understand brand sentiment, like for the people who did know Maxio or did know SaaS Optics or Chargeify, how did they feel about us? Was it generally positive or was it generally negative? This was an interesting one because I did this as an open text field response. So I didn't know what I didn't know. So I wanted people to answer in an open text field response. And then I manually categorized this into positive, negative, or neutral based on what these people said, or if they didn't know us at all and they were like, I don't know who that is, so I have no opinion. I did that. And then the last thing we looked at was we wanted to understand this aided and unaided awareness broken out by some key segments that are very important to us. So those things, like I mentioned, are all those audience things, right? Company size, persona, go-to-market model, which was very important to us. Are these people primarily sales-led? Do they have negotiated contracts? Do they have term lengths, yada, yada? Or are they primarily product-led, like you go and you self-service sign up on their website? Or maybe they have both, hybrid. That's hybrid go-to-market model is increasingly popular in the SaaS space. And then we wanted to understand pricing model as well. Because while all of this fun stuff was happening, the world was moving on, and it used to be subscription pricing for SaaS, but then this new thing called usage-based pricing came out. And we needed to understand too, like for companies that were doing subscription pricing and usage pricing, or a hybrid pricing model where they have both, what was those people's level of awareness of Maxio and what we could do to support them. And then the last thing was around pain points and like audience specific pain points and feature preferences. This was really like a roadmap validation exercise for us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Let me check in on the Q&A. Questions, chats. Okay. I'm going to soldier on and get through this thing. And then I'd love to like talk more as a group. So, okay. So these are the things that we uncovered when we got our survey results back into the analysis. So first is that we had major awareness gaps in product and engineering teams. So that's what I would call that legacy, like Chargeify persona. It wasn't terribly surprising to me just because Chargeify had been competing in a much larger market. Like there are a ton of billing providers, whereas SaaS Optics, while it did billing, it was primarily more like on the accounting side. It wasn't terribly surprising, but was good like third-party validation, like, hey, we have an awareness gap for product and engineering teams. We also uncovered that we had relatively low awareness amongst startups and companies with usage-based pricing, which was a big old problem for us because one, usage-based pricing is kind of like the pricing model of the future, or at least of the now. We're probably going to evolve out of it in the next couple years, but we'll see. I don't have a crystal ball. And then startups, we needed startups to know who we are, because the thing about billing is it's incredibly sticky, especially if it's integrated with your actual product. That is why it is so freaking hard to display Stripe once it's been implemented, because all of your billing logic is hard coded into your actual application. So you have to pull engineers off of building and shipping your own product in order to maintain and support this billing infrastructure. So not great. So we knew like we had some opportunities to make up some ground there. And then, it's not all bad news. One good thing is that we realized we had incredibly strong awareness and brand sentiment amongst finance and accounting teams. So that kind of legacy SaaS Optics persona, these people knew who we were, they trusted us, they liked us. And that was a good validation for us to understand like, okay, this is an audience that we know that we excel in. And then I just put this thing in here because I thought I just think this is cool. This is me being like a PMM nerd, but this is our Salesforce dashboard that tracks product requests and associates specific product requests to potential ARR impact. And this is primarily put together by it's put together by our product team, but the primary inputs for it are sales and customer success interacting with prospects and customers and hearing their feedback about the product. And then they submit a product feature request. And then the product team goes through and looks at, associated opportunities. And then they aggregate this all on this dashboard that shows us like, what should we prioritize in order to have the largest ARR impact? Which is just, to me, like real smart planning and roadmap development practice. But one thing that it doesn't do is tell us, what about the rest of the market? Like, what about people who are not currently customers of Maxio and who either are customers of competitors of ours, or maybe they're customers of nothing and they fit our ICP. They belong in one of our audiences, but they have not made any decision to select any vendor to do anything. Those are the people that we really needed to talk to and understand and represent in this like roadmap prioritization exercise. So that's one other huge unlock for Wynter, is the ability to go talk to people who are, represent your ICP, but are not necessarily actively in market, or not your customers or your competitors' customers, and get their POV on how they think about the problem and what would help them solve it. So that was just another little one thing I wanted to throw in here, because I think it's super duper powerful. We don't often talk about Wynter for product teams, but like, to me, that's like a huge unlock area for Wynter to expand into for their audience. Okay, so what happened? Oh wait, I skipped a total slide. Let me go back. Okay, so we got all these inputs. We had these 3 findings. And then what did we do? So after we got all of this input, we did 3 key things that I think ended up, they don't seem like huge, sexy things on paper, but like they were like huge org-wide lifts that we had to align on and execute. And remember, this is a PE-backed company and over 200 employees. So it's not some tiny startup where like shifts in strategy can happen overnight. So just bear that in mind. So the 3 things that happened, one is we decided to re-engage with the legacy brands. I think that we had made, in hindsight, a hasty decision to sunset the legacy brands too early. So like, we had gotten rid of the SAS Optics website, gotten rid of the Chargeify website. I mean, we had set up redirects to Maxio, but like, if you typed in SAS Optics, you'd be redirected to the Maxio homepage. So a couple things we did is like, for last year, any conference or event presence we did, we put all 3 brand names on our booth. So we said it's Maxio and it's SAS Optics and it's Chargeify, because we need people who understand what Chargeify and SAS Optics are to associate those 2 brands with the new brand Maxio. So that's one thing we did. The other thing is we realized that our redirect landing pages for SAS Optics and Chargeify were not optimized. Like, they talked all about Maxio and how excited we were and how much money we raised to merge these companies and yada, yada. What they didn't do was talk at all about the value that SAS Optics and Chargeify respectively delivered to their audiences and customers. And it explained that that value is still accessible in this new brand Maxio. And hey, why don't you go on over to the Maxio homepage and see how? So we did that little update, which was a huge improvement, I think, in terms of customer experience and prospect experience. The other thing we did was change our marketing budget like pretty dramatically. So I don't want to get too far into this, but essentially we had, the first couple of years of our merge, a very homogenous marketing budget in terms of like audience. So we weren't really segmenting the marketing budget by those 3 distinct audiences I mentioned, like the 1, 2, 3. So this made us realize we literally must segment these 2 audiences, or the 2 primary, and then we have like a tertiary one that's sort of deprioritized at the moment, but these 2 primary audiences. And we needed to understand the unit economics of creating and capturing demand by each of these audiences. And so that was huge. And what we realized, shocker, is that we had low awareness with that startup founder audience. Therefore, we need to increase our spend for demand creation activities like content marketing, like event presence, like thought leadership, like what have you, influencer relationships, that kind of thing. And then we needed to actually decrease our demand capture. So like, think any of your paid digital channels that you're using, decrease for that audience, because you can't capture demand that does not exist because there's no awareness that exists, right? And then on the other side, for the secondary audience, that finance and accounting, SMB mid-market finance and accounting, the legacy SAS Optics audience, strong brand awareness, right? People know us, people like us. We don't need to spend as much creating demand there. So we pulled back investments in influencer relationships and content marketing there. and we ramped up our demand capture budget. So that's where we want to go spend on digital spend. We want to capture demand that already exists in the market and preference that's already been established in that for that audience. So hopefully that made sense. I feel like that was a little bit of a zoo. And then the last thing we did, which was a pretty major overhaul, was to refine our ICP, which helped us target startup founders more effectively. And I wish I wrote this bullet differently because this doesn't really explain what we did. We completely overhauled our account scoring and lead scoring logic in Salesforce, because what we realized is that when we merged SaaS Optics and Chargeify, we literally merged Salesforce instances. We had created a account account ICP profile and lead profile scoring system that was super biased towards that legacy SaaS Optics audience. So literally, like, we weren't even outbounding to these startup founders and this, other audience that we really needed to. So we totally overhauled that, which was a major, major undertaking. And I'll have to give a big shout out to our head of RevOps, Liz. Liz is a genius and brave for doing all that. And we're just starting to see the results of how this is all panning out. Okay, let me click ahead. So what happened after we did all this wonderful stuff? So the first thing is that we achieved a 5% increase in brand awareness. So we ran this survey at the tail end of 2023. We reran it at the tail end of 2024. And we noticed that across our three brands, Maxio, SaaS Optics, and Chargeify, overall awareness went up 5%. So that doesn't sound like a big, sexy number, but let me explain. SaaS Optics and Chargeify awareness went down. And so not good, but that it was kind of good, because what was happening is it was translating into increased awareness for Maxio, the new brand, right? So that was one thing that happened. The other thing is we really improved engagement with the startup audience. I think earlier in the year, Pep did like a website teardown of Maxio homepage, which was totally catered towards that legacy SaaS Optics, like finance and accounting persona. And our CEO had asked Pep to do a teardown based on, like, imagine, we're targeting founders that are, wanting to do basic billing, like do the teardown through that lens. And unsurprisingly, Pep like completely shat on the Maxio homepage, because it was completely mismatched in terms of like what the message there was versus what we were trying to do. And so now, hopefully, if you go look at www.maxio.com, you will see something that appeals a little bit more to that startup founder. It is not perfect yet. More improvements needed, but it is, I think, a big leap forward from where we were even like 6 months ago, a year ago. Another thing that happened is we had higher pipeline value. We, like all other people on this call, have experienced incredibly difficult macroeconomic environment, which made pipe gen extremely difficult last year and the year before. And, God willing, it turns around this year, but it might not. But so what I noticed is I wanted to see our sales accepted leads, or we call them as sales accepted opportunities. I wanted to see sales accepted leads by segment, because I wanted to see if we were effectively creating more demand and capturing more demand in that startup segment. And what I noticed was kind of a bummer was it was pretty flat year over year in terms of like the record count. But weirdly, the pipeline value, like how much ARR was associated with it, went up. So that shows me that even though we are still working on the demand creation aspect of it, we are proving for the startups who are discovering Maxio, we are speaking to them in a more effective way, which is being reflected in a higher ACV. So interesting observation. And then the last thing here is around increased share of search. So demand gen folks on here will know all about this. I'm like, that's not my cup of tea, but I did think this was interesting. And our head of demand gen, Brian Austin, shared this with me. So Google publishes this share of search thing. So it looks at like how much, search share are you capturing relative to your competitors? You'll see this incredibly disheartening graph that shows some pretty big players who are really dominating the billing market. But it's not really surprising, right? Stripe, Zora, ChargeBee, like these are all pretty established companies that are much bigger than Maxio, have much bigger budgets, yada, yada. What I did think was interesting is here we are, Maxio, trailing behind our friends Recurly, who are more on that like B2C billing space. In October of 2023, we're sitting at like 5.46%. And then you see us steadily trending up tiny, a little bit down there. And then by October 2024, we're up two percentage points since October 2023. And again, I know this is not like the big, sexy, like huge lift that, case studies are made of. But like when you think about this how hyper competitive this market and how established the players are in it, Stripe, Zora, ChargeBee, this is an incredible improvement in terms of our ability to capture share of voice here. So that was another thing I thought was cool, wanted to highlight as a success metric. And then I'll leave you guys with this, like brand research is a living playbook, right? Like this is, there really is no point of doing this if you are going to run a survey, do some analysis, and then let that sit on a shelf and never do anything about it. The real power of brand research, market research, and really any data, right, is your ability to formulate a narrative around it, which turns into an action plan. And I think the real strategic value of PMMs here is how do you use your political capital to persuade people to do something about what you have uncovered in your brand or market research. That is like we could have a whole other conversation about that. If y'all want to talk about that now, I think that'd be super interesting. Get me psyched. I need to take a freaking breath because I've been talking 9 million miles an hour. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to take a breath. But that's what I have for you guys. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Andrea. It's so good to hear all about the story. While I let you catch your breath a little bit, thank you so much for going so into depth as well about your journey with Wynter too. We've got plenty of different questions coming through. Perhaps we can start with Andrea's one, which is all about audience size for the survey. So I know Pep's discussing this in the chat section of the workshop, so you can take a little look there. Andrea's asked, what was the audience size of the survey? And did you get any pushback on the sample size not being large enough compared to surveys run by traditional research firms? So yeah, if you'd like to talk a little bit about that, as I guess you were the champion of Wynter in those moments. So what was that like for you? And yeah, how did it compare?
Yeah. So yes, 100%. I did. I got a lot of pushback. Okay. So the audience size that we went with was 100. So we surveyed 100 people, which is not a huge sample size, but and Pep can speak to the why does that matter? Like, why does that matter or not matter? Like much more intelligently than I can. What I will say is this is how I presented it to my leadership. I was like, okay, look, here's what we can do. We can hire an expensive market research firm, which is probably going to produce maybe more than 100, but certainly not 10,000 survey respondents, right? And also the bigger the sample size, the longer it's going to take to recruit that audience. So like, this is sort of an argument of like speed to insight or speed to directional insight, right? So like, I'm not in the business of absolutes. Like nothing I learned in the survey do I believe to be empirically true always, forever, never going to change. I think of it more as like, this is directionally accurate and it gives me enough to make a strategic decision and a strategic recommendation that we can act on now versus waiting 2 years to get the insight. And by then the market's changed again. So there's a little bit of a speed aspect here.
No, definitely.
Did I answer that question? I think that was
absolutely. And I mean, you were talking about how it took 2.5 weeks. You said you're kind of with that insight already, ready to make decisions. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you. Okay, we've got a question here from John, which is all about branding. So he's asked, if it was your choice, would you have kept the brand with the strongest equity and avoided a rebrand?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, of course. So John's asking, if it was your choice, Would you have kept the brand with the strongest equity and avoided a rebrand? Or would you have gone ahead with merging everything together?
You know, I love to wax poetic about this because, you know, I feel like I, you know, am all knowing and all powerful and I would have made a better decision. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, for me personally, as a product marketer who has to figure out how we tell this combined story, yeah, it would have been way easier for us to just pick the brand that we thought had stronger equity and done that. I will say here's what would have happened if we did that. If we had picked the brand with stronger brand equity 3-4 years, whenever 2021 was, we would have picked SAS Optics because they had a higher NPS, higher CSAT, just generally better reputation in the market. And that would have been a mistake because now what we're seeing is that the billing is no longer a like back office check the box type decision. It is a strategic decision because it's very intertwined with pricing and your ability to monetize your product or service, which has never been more important than now when all of these companies are doing AI products and services. So we would have totally missed what I'm calling like the strategic billing evolution that's happening now.
Yeah.
If we had gone with SAS Optics and abandoned this startup founder audience and abandoned this like billing first use case. So, you know, I don't know. I think, you know, whatever you make decisions, life goes on. Everyone's an oracle in hindsight, but I think that we made the best decision with the information we had at the time. And now I can see, even though it's been pain over the last 3 years trying to figure this out, we're actually pretty well positioned to capitalize on this billing evolution, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible. Okay. And I know Pep's asked a quick question here too, saying every merger has an acquisition. So which one of those acquired each other when we're talking about the two brands previously?
Every merger is an acquisition.
Yeah.
Okay, but like, yes, you're right. I didn't realize this because I'm like a noob. I'm like pretty, you know, I've never been a part of a merge or acquisition before. This was positioned as a merger of equals. Okay. Which was that was how Battery positioned it to the teams. That's how we took it to market. So I think culturally, SAS Optics sort of dominated Chargify. And I'm sorry to my Chargify coworkers. I love you and you guys created a beautiful culture. But I do think culturally post-merge, SAS Optics sort of dominated, which is another reason that like for the first couple years after merge, we were going to market pretty heavy with that SMB mid-market financial automation rev rec message. So I guess that's kind of how it played out culturally, but it was totally positioned as a merger of equals, which was, I think, a little bit of a another maybe missed opportunity because it did create a lot of internal fuss and confusion about like, okay, well, like who is driving this bus? You know, like, is it Chargify? Is it SAS Optics? We have all these execs that are from the legacy companies. And, you know, Battery ended up bringing in a net new CEO, which I think was a wise decision because this was a guy who had no skin in the legacy game. And he was just like, let me take the best of each of these companies and push that forward. And so that's kind of how it played out.
Okay, fantastic. Brilliant. We've got a few more questions here, which I'm trying to group them all together, but it's a little bit tricky. So let's have a look at John's one. John here's talking about demand creation. So he says, when you say more demand creation, less digital, does that include wider brands comms to improve that awareness? i.e., do you put brand under the demand gen umbrella? Asking as an ignorant B2C guy.
Oh my God, John, you're not ignorant. This is like, I ask myself this all the time. Also, I know there's some demand gen people on this call right now who are like, what is she talking? She doesn't know what she's talking about. Demand creation, demand capture, paid digital, blah, 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 blah. And you're right. You're probably right. But let me just tell you as a non-demand gen person how I think about this. Paid digital has primarily, for B2B, caveat, been used as an acquisition, like a conversion channel, right? Like the primary CTA is get a demo, talk to us, do something now. Now, not everybody does that. Some people do have genuine brand awareness campaigns that they activate in paid digital channels, right? I just don't think it's that effective. Like especially for B2B, like, so in B2C, yeah, like you want to show an image of Kylie Jenner or whoever the new it girl is wearing your e-commerce product or whatever. And like, that's demand creation. In B2B, the equivalent of that is like, we slap our brand name on a not a billboard, but like, on a search ad or whatever. And like, does that create awareness? I don't know. I think what we're finding now, and this goes into like the Chris Walker, like school of thought, like, is that most demand creation happens organically. We do not pay for it. I mean, well, we do pay for it in the sense of like, we pay to create kick-ass content and we pay to host events and we pay to do those things. But like, it's not created in paid channels, I guess. Like it's created organically. And that's really where you should focus your demand creation budget and activities.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple of final ones here. We've got one from Zane now. This one says, how did your internal team measure the AIR for new yet to be executed product improvements?
Good question. So, well, for the sales and CS process, like every product request is tied to an opportunity. And so that opportunity, either like like a real opportunity with a customer or a prospect. So that either has reached a point where we gave them a quote. So it has an ARR value, like a more accurate one, or it has a placeholder value based on what we know about our ACV, typical ACV in those segments. So that's how we do that.
Okay, perfect. Brilliant. So I think that's everything in terms of questions. I don't know if anyone else has got any final questions they want to put in the chat box. We're nearly at time. And let me just wait a couple of moments just to see. I think we might be all good. Well, thank you ever so much, Andrea. It's been so great to speak to you, hearing all about your journey with Wynter and also at Maxio as well. Of course, this session is going to be recorded, so everything will be uploaded online soon. But if you want to find Andrea, you can find her on LinkedIn. And also she'll be speaking at Spring next month with us. So all details of that can be found on our website. But feel free to reach out to her if you do have any further questions or you are watching on demand. But yeah, thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, Andrea. And thank you as well for all of your amazing questions. So yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.